Greetings and welcome. This is going to be a podcast that I'm going to hold every now and then to just explore the kybalion and just basically how the mind works. All right, our mental health, our mental wellness, our mental awareness. So to start it off, we're going to be discussing reality. What do we think reality is? All right, so the definition of reality according to the dictionary is the world or the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or national idea or notional idea of them. So, and also the state or quality of having existence or substance. All right. So we're going to be discussing this reality. What is your reality? All right, because according to the dictionary, it is the state of things as they actually exist. But according to psychology or mental science experts, reality is a figment of the imagination. Reality is subjective. All right. And you have to know what subjective is. Subjective is something that is how would you say? Let's look it up. When you can't find it, you look it up. Definition of subjective is based on or influenced by personal feelings, tastes, or opinions. Okay, so subjective is opinionated. All right, objective is fact. Okay, so we live in an objective world. All right, which is a reality, but that reality is also subjective. All right, meaning that water is wet. That is not objective, that's subjective. We assume water is to be wet, right? So since we assume water to be wet, we make it objective, and that objective now makes water wet, right? You have to look at it this way. All right, because when you say to yourself, I'm broke, are you really broke? No, that's objective. Subjectively, you're rich because you get paid tomorrow, right? So are you really broke? No, you're not broke, right? But if you objectively believe that you are broke, you will get paid tomorrow, something will happen, and it will reduce your paycheck to zero, back to broke, because that's how the mind works. All right. So subjectively, if you're telling yourself I'm rich, then eventually that subjective notion of being rich will filter into your conscious self. Your conscious self will now be awoken to the fact that you are rich, right? And being rich, then objectively, it will now produce it in the world as wealth. All right. And subjectively, you could make that wealth whatever you want it to be. You could make it $1 million. You could make it $100 million. It's all subjective. The minute you start to believe this reality is objective as opposed to subjective, right? As to an assumption, right? Life is an assumption. All right. And let's look up assumption. What assumption is. I know it says to assume. Definition of assumption, a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without proof. All right. So when you think about it, assumption is faith, because faith is something hoped for and not seen. It's only seen in the mind. It's only seen in dreams. It's only seen in a feeling. All right. And also, again, that feeling is subjective. So as long as you continue to embrace that feeling, you will now make that feeling objective. And as you make that feeling objective, it'll now manifest itself into the world. All right? All right? All right. All right. Now, what you're now doing is you're now taking control of your reality. All right. And when you're taking control, you're now making reality subjective and not objective. All right? Because when you're ignorant to reality, everything is objective. Nothing is subjective. Because you really believe that the world is the way the world is. Right? So change your mind, change the world. Change your feelings, change your circumstances. It's all control. Right? So when we're dealing with the principle of mentalism, the all is mind, the universe is mental, it's actually speaking about the person that is now using the principle, right? That is now aware of the principle of mentalism, because the principle of mentalism is subjective. It's not objective. It's subjective, right? Because the all, right, that we assume is the Almighty God or the creator of the universe. But when I now begin to think, I am now embracing the all, the Almighty God, and the creator of the universe within myself. So when I say all is mine, that means I am now using my mind. And now the universe and all that is within God is now within me. I have all control of knowledge that I can draw from. All right? Because it's subjective. It's not objective. I do not have to go to a book or a library to figure out these things. Common sense was created before books. All right? So if you need concrete proof from a book and you're denying what is actually an assumption, which is faith, because faith is hoped for, not seen. Right? So if you need to read it with your own two eyes, then you do not have faith. You do not have hope. You do not have assumption. You live in this world, in this reality objectively. All right? So you can pray, but you have to know when you pray, you know you're not using your assumption and you're not using faith, because you have to walk on faith. But if you need to use your two eyes and your senses to make reality for you, then you're no longer using assumption. You're now using the world as an objective, right? And the principle of mentality mentalism is no longer practiced by you. You may assume you're using mentalism, but you're not, because the all is mind and the universe is mental. So that means common sense is created before books. So my feeling supersedes what's in a book. My assumption supersedes what's in a book, because a book cannot tell me how I feel. A book cannot tell me how I think. It could tell me how to think. And then again, that is still subjective. That is still an assumption. It's not objective, because a psychologist cannot write a book and say that what he wrote in the book is for all of mankind, because not of all mankind thinks the same, behave the same, are the same. Right? So here's a psychologist that wrote a book and it's subjective only to that psychologist, only objective to that psychologist, because that psychologist is actually speaking of that psychologist. He's not speaking of you nor I. He's only assuming, and his assumption will only be that if I decide to buy this book, I can relate mentally to that book. And that's an assumption. All right? So I want you to understand that your reality is subjective. It is. Because once you begin to think differently, everything will become as you think. Right? Because right now you're living in chance. You're living by circumstances. Right? You're letting life just come to you instead of you actually being the director in the director seat and calling the shots. See, if you put on your director hat, you will call the shots for your life. Right? Because when you think about it, you're the main star. You're that $20 million actor that is acting in this reality that you call life. But you're not following the script. Do you understand you're not following the script? Your script is only determined by Monday through Friday. You know you have to get up and go to work, right? You know you have to get up at a certain time. You know you have to go to sleep at a certain time. You know you have to be at work at a certain time. You know you leave work at a certain time. These things you do not need a script for. All right? This is the groundhog in your groundhog day that you're living. And you will do that Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and you'll start again. And there will be no break within that life, within that thought, unless you decide to change your thinking. Right? It's all control. And the definition of control is the power to influence or direct people's behavior or the course of events. So now you can take control mentally of your life, of your being, to control your life, to control the outcomes that happens in your life. That's the reality that you need to accept. And again, that is still subjective. That's still an assumption. You do not have to believe anything or everything that I say. You can figure it out on your own, because common sense was made before books. And if you deal with faith and you walk on faith, then there shouldn't be any reason for you to not find the answers to this reality, or to uncover the questions that are put forward in this podcast. All right, so I'm going to take time and let you think about it, and I'll speak to you soon. And you all have a great day, and thank you for listening.